They threw him out into the freezing wilderness with nothing. But the place his dog dragged him to wasn't just shelter. It was hiding something buried beneath the mountain. Lucas Grant had already lost everything by the time the door closed behind him. No family. No home. Just the cold Montana wind and the sound of his own boots fading into the dark. But Titan didn't hesitate. The German shepherd pulled him forward, into the forest, through the snow, toward a forgotten stone house no one talked about, and beneath it, something waited. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. The night they told Lucas Grant to leave, there was no shouting, no slammed doors, no broken glass, no raised voices echoing through the old wooden farmhouse that had stood in the Bitterroot Valley for nearly 80 years. There was only the quiet scrape of a chair across the kitchen floor, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the steady ticking of the clock above the sink. Lucas stood by the doorway, boots still dusted with snow, his breath faint in the dim yellow light. He had just come in from checking the fence line, the same way he had done every winter since he was a boy. Nothing about the night had warned him that it would be his last under that roof. Across the table, his older brother Daniel didn't look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on a folded piece of paper, some legal document Lucas hadn't been allowed to read. Beside him, Rebecca sat stiff and composed, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long since gone cold. So she spoke first. "You've stayed long enough." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Lucas frowned slightly, not fully understanding. "What?" Rebecca finally met his eyes. There was no anger there. No guilt either. Just a kind of tired finality, like someone closing a book they'd never cared to finish. "This isn't your home anymore." The words didn't hit him all at once. They settled slowly, like snow falling through still air. Lucas let out a small breath, his mind trying to catch up. "Dad just passed 3 weeks ago." Daniel shifted in his chair, but still didn't look up. "And the will's been settled." Lucas glanced at the paper in Daniel's hands, then back at his brother's face. "So what does that mean?" This time Daniel spoke, his voice flat, rehearsed. "It means the land's in my name now." A pause. "And it means we're not responsible for you." Something in Lucas's chest tightened. Not sharp, not explosive, just a quiet pressure, like something heavy settling into place. "I've lived here my whole life," he said. Rebecca stood slowly, setting her mug down with a soft click. "You came back here. That's different." Came back. As if the years he'd spent overseas, years he hadn't chosen, years he rarely spoke about, had erased everything that came before them. Lucas opened his mouth, but no words came out. Behind him, a low sound broke the silence. Titan stepped forward. The German shepherd had been lying near the door, watching, listening in that still, alert way dogs have when something isn't right. Now he moved between Lucas and the table, his body tense, ears forward, a quiet growl rumbling deep in his chest. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain. Rebecca stiffened. "Control your dog." Lucas didn't move. His hand rested lightly on Titan's back, feeling the steady warmth beneath his palm. "He's not doing anything. He's making me uncomfortable." Titan didn't take his eyes off them. Daniel finally looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Lucas, this isn't a discussion." The words landed harder than anything else had. Not a discussion. Not a conversation. Not a disagreement. A decision that had already been made. Lucas felt something flicker behind his ribs. Something that might have been anger once, years ago, before it had been worn down into something quieter, something colder. "What exactly are you saying?" he asked. Daniel folded the paper neatly, placing it on the table with deliberate care. I'm saying you need to leave. Tonight. The clock ticked on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Lucas stared at him, waiting for something, anything, that might soften the edges of what had just been said. There was nothing. Rebecca crossed her arms. We've been more than patient. You don't have a job. You don't contribute. And we're not running a charity. Lucas almost laughed at that, but the sound never made it out. Not running a charity. 8 years old, sitting at this same table, eating canned soup because that's what they could afford. 16, fixing fences in the snow while Daniel stayed inside studying for a future Lucas had never been given a chance to think about. 19, leaving for the military because there hadn't been another option. 36, standing here now, being told he was nothing, temporary, disposable, yet his hand tightened slightly on Titan's fur. I've been helping on this ranch since I could walk, Lucas said quietly. And we appreciate that, Rebecca replied, though her tone suggested the opposite. But that doesn't mean you get to stay forever. Forever. Lucas looked around the kitchen, the chipped cabinets, the old stove, the window that looked out over the fields now buried under snow. He had memories in every corner of this place, and suddenly, none of them seemed to matter. Titan's growl deepened, just a fraction. Lucas exhaled slowly and placed a firm hand on the dog's neck. Easy. Titan obeyed, but he didn't step back. Daniel pushed his chair out and stood. You've got until morning. Lucas shook his head once. No. Both of them blinked. I'll go now. It surprised even him how calm his voice sounded. Daniel frowned. Suit yourself. Lucas turned toward the hallway without another word. His room looked exactly the way he had left it. Simple. Sparse. A bed, a dresser, a duffel bag already half-packed from a life that had never quite settled anywhere. He moved through it mechanically. A few shirts, socks, the old jacket he'd worn overseas, a photograph of his father, taken years before illness had hollowed him out. That was it. Everything he owned fit into one worn bag. Titan stayed close, watching every movement, his tail low, his body still tense. When Lucas zipped the bag shut, the sound seemed louder than it should have been. He slung it over his shoulder and took one last look around the room. There was nothing left here for him, nothing that hadn't already been taken. Back in the kitchen, Daniel and Rebecca were exactly where he'd left them. Neither spoke as Lucas walked past. Neither tried to stop him. At the door, he paused for just a moment, not because he expected them to say something, but because part of him needed to know for sure. Nothing came. He opened the door. The cold hit him immediately, sharp and unforgiving, the Montana night stretching out before him in endless white and black. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he stepped onto the porch. Titan followed without hesitation. Behind him, the door closed. Not slammed, just shut. Lucas stood there for a second, the silence of the valley pressing in around him. The wind moved across the fields, carrying that hollow, distant sound that always came before a storm. For a split second, it shifted in his mind. The wind became rotors. The darkness became smoke. The snow became ash. His breath hitched. Titan nudged his leg, once, firm, grounding. Lucas blinked, the image breaking apart, reality snapping back into place. He let out a slow breath, steadying himself. Yeah, he muttered quietly, his hand finding the dog's head. I'm here. Titan looked up at him, eyes steady, unshaken. Lucas adjusted the strap of his bag and stepped off the porch. He didn't look back. The road stretched ahead, disappearing into the trees that marked the edge of the Bitterroot wilderness. Most people would have turned toward town, toward light, toward other people. Lucas walked the other way, into the dark, into the mountains, into the place where no one would come looking. Snow fell harder as he moved, each step taking him further from everything he had ever known. And beside him, Titan kept pace, silent, watchful, unwavering. For the first time that night, Lucas understood something with absolute clarity. He hadn't just been thrown out. He had been erased. And out here, in the cold, in the silence, in the endless wilderness, no one would even notice, except the dog who refused to leave him. And somehow, that was enough to keep him walking. The snow thickened as Lucas moved deeper into the trees, each step quieter than the last, as the forest swallowed the sound of the open valley behind him. The road disappeared within minutes, replaced by uneven ground, frozen roots, and patches of ice hidden beneath powder. Titan stayed close, never more than a step ahead or behind, adjusting his pace to Lucas's without being told. The night stretched on, endless and cold. Lucas didn't know how long they walked. Time lost its shape out here. There were no streetlights, no passing cars, no distant hum of civilization. Just wind threading through branches and the slow rhythm of his boots pressing into snow. At some point, the wind shifted. A low, chopping sound rode in on it. Lucas froze. His breath caught in his throat as his head snapped upward. There was nothing in the sky, just darkness and falling snow, but the sound lingered in his ears. Rotors. His heart slammed once, hard, then again. His vision tightened, the edges blurring as something inside him snapped loose, dragging him backward through years he had tried not to remember. The forest around him flickered. Trees became silhouettes of shattered buildings. Snow became drifting ash, the cold air filled with echoes of shouting, distant and distorted. Lucas staggered, his knees weakening as the ground beneath him felt suddenly unstable, unreal. He couldn't breathe. Not here. Not again. A sharp pressure hit his leg. Titan. The dog shoved against him, firm and insistent, breaking through the spiral. Lucas blinked hard. The forest returned. Snow. Trees. Silence. His breath came back in ragged pulls as he leaned forward, bracing his hands on his thighs. Yeah, I'm here, he muttered, more to himself than the dog. Titan stood close, his body pressed lightly against Lucas's leg, steady as a rock. He didn't move until Lucas straightened again. That was the first time Lucas realized something he hadn't fully allowed himself to admit before. Titan wasn't just following him. He was watching him, guarding him, and keeping him from slipping too far into places Lucas couldn't fight his way out of alone. Lucas swallowed, the tightness in his chest easing just enough to keep going. Good call, he said quietly, reaching down to grip the back of Titan's neck for a second. The dog's ears flicked, but he didn't pull away. They moved again, deeper. The trees grew thicker as the land began to rise, the slope gentle at first, then steeper with each passing stretch. Snow gathered heavier between the trunks, untouched and pristine, forcing Lucas to lift his boots higher with every step. His legs started to burn. His shoulders ached beneath the weight of the bag. The cold crept in through every seam of his clothing, slow and patient. By the time the sky began to lighten, just barely, as a thin gray hint behind the clouds, Lucas was running on instinct alone. He found a fallen log half buried in snow and sank down against it, his body finally demanding a break. Titan circled once before settling beside him, close enough that their sides touched. Lucas leaned back, closing his eyes for just a second. That was all it took. The world slipped sideways again. This time it wasn't sound that pulled him under. It was silence. Too quiet. Too still. The kind of silence that came right before everything went wrong. Lucas's eyes snapped open. He was back in the forest, but his pulse was racing like he'd just run miles. Titan was already on his feet, alert, watching. The dog's head turned slightly, nose lifting into the air. Lucas followed his gaze, scanning the trees. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Oh, just the forest, holding its breath. "You hear something?" Lucas asked under his breath. Titan didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply stood there, focused, as if weighing something invisible. Then, slowly, he relaxed. Lucas exhaled. "Yeah, me too," he murmured. It wasn't a lie. He felt it. That quiet sense that they weren't entirely alone out here. Not yet. But maybe soon. Lucas pushed himself back to his feet, ignoring the stiffness in his joints. They couldn't stay exposed. Not in this cold. Not with night coming again in a few hours. They needed shelter. Real shelter. Not just a log and a patch of snow. He adjusted his bag and looked ahead. The land continued upward, the trees thinning just enough to reveal darker shapes beyond. Rock formations, maybe, or the beginning of higher ground. "Up," Lucas said, went more to himself than to Titan. "We go up." Higher meant wind, but it also meant vantage, and maybe, if they were lucky, something else. Titan moved first, picking a path through the trees with quiet confidence. Lucas followed. The climb was harder than anything they had done so far. Snow deepened in pockets, swallowing his boots nearly to the knee. Hidden rocks shifted underfoot, threatening to twist an ankle if he wasn't careful. Branches snagged at his jacket, pulling him sideways when his balance slipped. More than once, Lucas had to stop just to catch his breath. Each time, Titan waited, never wandering far, never losing sight of him. By midday, the sky darkened again. The storm wasn't done. Lucas could feel it in the air, the pressure dropping, the wind sharpening, the cold biting deeper with every gust. But they reached a ridge just as the first real wave of wind came through. It hit hard, cutting across the slope like a blade. Lucas staggered slightly, but held his ground. From up here, he could see farther. The valley behind them was gone, buried beneath drifting snow and distance. Ahead, the mountains stretched on, endless and indifferent. No roads, no houses, no signs of anyone. Exactly what he had wanted. And suddenly, exactly what he feared. Lucas stood there for a long moment, the wind pulling at his jacket, the cold seeping into his bones. This was it. There was no going back, no turning around and knocking on that door again, no second chances. He looked down at Titan. The dog met his gaze without hesitation. No doubt, no fear, just that same steady presence. Lucas let out a slow breath. "Oh, guess it's just us now," he said. Titan's tail moved once, not a wag, just a small, certain motion. Lucas nodded. "All right," he whispered. "Then we keep moving." The wind howled across the ridge as they stepped forward together, leaving the last traces of Lucas Grant's old life buried somewhere far behind them in the snow. And with every step into the mountains, the world he had known grew smaller, quieter, fading, until there was nothing left but the cold, the wilderness, and the dog who refused to let him fall apart inside it. The wind eased as they dropped down from the ridge, but the cold didn't. It settled deeper, heavier. By late afternoon, the light had flattened into a dull gray that made everything look the same. Trees, snow, sky blending into one endless stretch of silence. Lucas's steps slowed, not by choice, while his body was beginning to give out. Every muscle felt tight, overworked, like it had been pushed too far without rest. His hands were stiff inside his gloves, his fingers numb despite the constant movement. Even his breathing had changed, shorter, shallower, like his lungs were tired of pulling in air that burned on the way down. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, hadn't slept properly in longer than he could remember, and now, out here, it was catching up to him. "Just a little further," he muttered under his breath. Titan glanced back. The dog's pace slowed, matching Lucas's again, but there was something different now, something sharper in the way he moved, the way his ears stayed forward, alert. Lucas barely noticed. He was focused on putting one foot in front of the other. That was all that mattered. Step, step, step. While the ground shifted slightly beneath him, Lucas stumbled, catching himself against a tree before he could fall. His vision flickered. For a second, the forest bent out of shape, lines blurring, shadows stretching. He blinked hard, forcing it back into place. "Not now," he whispered. But his body didn't listen. His legs felt heavier with each step, like the snow was pulling him down, urging him to stop. Just for a minute. Just to rest. That's all it would take. Lucas knew that feeling. He had seen it before. Men sitting down in the cold because they were too tired to keep going. Men who never stood back up. "No," he said out loud, sharper this time. Titan stopped, turned. The dog walked back to him, pressing his nose firmly against Lucas's hand. Lucas exhaled slowly, grounding himself in the warmth of that contact. "I'm good," he said, though his voice didn't sound convincing even to him. Titan didn't move. He didn't step away. Instead, he grabbed the edge of Lucas's sleeve gently, but firmly, and pulled. Lucas frowned. "Hey!" Titan pulled again. Not playful, not curious, insistent. Lucas shook his arm free, irritation flickering through the exhaustion. "I said, I'm fine." Titan didn't react to the tone. He simply turned, took a few steps forward, then stopped and looked back. Waiting. Lucas stared at him for a long second. "What?" Titan stepped forward again, then back, then forward. A pattern, a signal. Lucas's brow furrowed. The dog wasn't just moving, he was trying to show him something. Lucas shifted his weight, forcing himself to follow. All right, he muttered. "Lead the way." Titan didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose now, cutting slightly off the path Lucas had been taking, angling toward a thicker cluster of trees and rock that Lucas might have otherwise ignored. The ground changed underfoot. Less even. More broken. Snow piled differently here, drifting into shallow pockets between jagged stones and fallen branches. Lucas pushed forward, his curiosity barely outweighing his exhaustion. "What is it, huh?" he asked quietly. Titan didn't answer, but his pace quickened, and then he stopped. Suddenly. Completely. Lucas nearly walked into him. "What?" Titan was staring at something ahead, not moving, not blinking. Lucas followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing, just rock. A sloped section of stone half covered in snow, framed by twisted roots from a tree clinging to the hillside above it. It looked like every other piece of mountain terrain they had passed. Ordinary. Empty. Lucas sighed, his shoulders sagging. "That's it? You dragged me over here for a rock?" Titan didn't move. The dog stepped closer to the formation, lowering his head. His nose pressed into the snow near the base of the rock. He inhaled, then again. Slow. Focused. Lucas watched, confusion flickering across his face. "What are you—" Titan started digging. Not casually. Not like a dog playing in snow. This was fast, aggressive, determined. Snow flew backward in quick bursts as his paws tore into the ground, exposing darker layers beneath. Hey, hey! Lucas stepped forward. What are you doing? Titan didn't stop. His breathing picked up, short and sharp as he dug deeper, uncovering something just beneath the surface. Lucas hesitated, then crouched down beside him. Hold on. He brushed away some of the snow with his gloved hand. The texture changed immediately. This wasn't loose earth. It was different, harder, smoother. Lucas wiped more away, and then he saw it. A narrow gap, barely visible at first, just a thin, uneven line where the rock met something darker behind it. But it was there. A crack. No, not just a crack. An opening. Lucas leaned closer, his breath fogging in the cold air as he squinted into the space. A faint draft brushed against his face. Cold, but not as cold as the air outside. Steady, controlled. His heart skipped. That's not natural, he murmured. Titan dug harder, widening the space just enough to expose more of the edge. Lucas reached out, pressing his hand against the stone. It wasn't solid all the way through. There was space behind it. A hollow. Lucas sat back slowly, and his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. How did you even... he muttered, glancing at Titan. The dog paused just long enough to look at him, snow clinging to his fur, chest rising and falling from the effort. There was something almost knowing in his eyes, like he had been searching for this, like he had known it was here. Lucas shook his head, trying to clear the thought. All right, he said quietly. He pushed himself to his feet, stepping back to get a better look at the formation. The rock face wasn't random. Now that he was really looking, he could see it. Subtle lines, edges that didn't quite match the natural flow of the mountain. And those roots, they weren't just growing over the rock. They were holding something in place. Lucas stepped closer again, brushing away more snow, tracing the outline with his hands. But this wasn't just a crack in the mountain. It was an entrance. Hidden. Deliberately. His pulse quickened, a flicker of something unfamiliar rising through the exhaustion. Hope. Titan, he said under his breath. The dog stood beside him now, still waiting. Lucas looked at the narrow opening again, then at the dark space beyond it. They didn't have many options. Out here in this cold, an opening like this could mean shelter. It could mean warmth. It could mean survival. Or it could mean nothing at all. Lucas swallowed. Only one way to find out, he muttered. Titan didn't hesitate. The dog moved forward, squeezing into the gap first, his body disappearing into the darkness beyond. Hey, wait! Lucas reached out instinctively, but Titan was already inside. Lucas froze for half a second, tension snapping tight in his chest, and then he stepped forward. Titan! No answer, just the faint echo of movement from within. Lucas took a breath, then dropped to one knee, angling his shoulders to fit through the narrow opening. The stone scraped against his jacket as he pushed inside, the light behind him fading quickly as the darkness swallowed him whole. Cold air shifted around him, different, still. And somewhere ahead, a faint sound, movement. Lucas's heart began to pound. Titan! The darkness didn't answer, but it didn't feel empty. Not anymore. The darkness closed in around Lucas almost instantly. The narrow entrance swallowed what little light remained from outside, leaving only a dim gray outline behind him. The air shifted, cool, still, and strangely steady, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Lucas moved slowly, on one hand pressed against the rough stone wall to guide himself. Titan, he called again, his voice lower now, careful. A faint sound answered him. Not a bark, not a growl. A soft movement ahead, scraping, shifting, something brushing against rock. Relief flickered in his chest. "I'm coming," he murmured. The passage angled downward, forcing Lucas to crouch as he moved deeper. The ceiling dipped low in places, jagged stone brushing against his shoulders, his jacket catching slightly as he squeezed through tighter sections. The temperature changed the farther he went. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't biting cold either. It held steady, protected from the wind outside. That alone made his pulse pick up. Shelter. Real shelter. But the darkness pressed heavier the deeper he went, wrapping around him until even the outline of his own hands began to fade. Lucas swallowed, forcing himself to stay focused. One step, then another. His boots scraped softly against the ground. Then, a sharp crack. Lucas flinched. Stone shifted above him. "Titan!" A sudden rumble broke through the silence. Not loud, but close. Too close. Lucas jerked backward instinctively as something gave way ahead. A small section of rock loosening, tumbling down into the narrow space with a dull, heavy thud. Dust and grit filled the air. For a second, Lucas couldn't see, couldn't hear anything except his own heartbeat slamming in his ears. Then, a sound. A low, strained whine. Lucas's head snapped forward. "Titan!" The panic hit instantly, not slow, not controlled. It surged up from somewhere deep, sharp, and overwhelming. Crashing into his chest like a wave he couldn't stop. He lunged forward, dropping to his knees, hands reaching blindly through the darkness. "Titan, where are you?" His voice echoed off the stone, louder than he intended. The air felt thinner, tighter. His breathing quickened, each inhale pulling too fast, too shallow. For a split second, the tunnel wasn't a tunnel anymore. It was something else. Confined, trapped, dark walls closing in. A different place, a different time. Lucas froze. His hands trembled as the edges of his vision blurred again. Not here. Not now. Another sound cut through the spiral. Closer this time. A weak shuffle. A breath. Lucas forced himself forward, pushing through the haze, clawing at his mind. "Stay with me," he muttered under his breath, as much to himself as to the dog, and his hand brushed against something warm. Fur. Titan. Relief hit so hard it almost knocked the air out of him. The dog was half-pinned beneath a chunk of fallen rock. Not fully trapped, but enough to hold him in place. Lucas's heart pounded harder. "Easy, easy," he said quickly, his voice shaking despite his effort to steady it. Titan let out a low, strained sound, but didn't struggle wildly. He held still. Trusting. Lucas shifted his position, bracing himself against the uneven ground. "All right, I've got you." He pressed both hands against the stone. It wasn't massive, but it was heavy, and Lucas's strength was already worn thin. He gritted his teeth, pushing. Nothing. The rock didn't move. His breath came faster. Again. He pushed harder this time, muscles straining, shoulders tightening as he forced every ounce of strength he had left into it. The stone shifted slightly. Just enough. "Come on! Come on!" Titan shifted beneath it, helping, pulling himself back as the pressure eased. Lucas gave one more hard shove. The rock rolled just enough to free the dog. Titan scrambled out immediately, stumbling slightly before catching his balance. Lucas leaned back, chest heaving. "You okay?" he asked, reaching out instinctively. His hand found Titan's side. The dog flinched. Lucas froze. Slowly, carefully, he ran his hand along Titan's body. There, a shallow cut along the shoulder where the rock had grazed him. Not deep, but enough to bleed. Lucas's breath hitched. For a second, the sight of it pulled him somewhere else again. Red. Too red, too familiar. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the image away. "Stay here," he said, voice low but firm. He tore off one of the cloth wraps from inside his jacket, hands moving quickly despite the lingering tremor in his fingers. "Just a scratch," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure Titan or himself. The dog stood still as Lucas pressed the cloth gently against the wound. No panic, no resistance, just steady breathing, eyes fixed on Lucas. "I've got you," Lucas said again. This time it sounded steadier, more certain. Titan's ears flicked slightly. Lucas secured the cloth as best he could in the dim light, his movements careful, deliberate. When he finished, he rested his hand against Titan's neck for a moment longer than necessary, grounding, anchoring. The panic began to fade, slowly, replaced by something else. "Focus," as Lucas exhaled and leaned back, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness again. The air had settled after the small collapse. Dust hung faintly, but the space ahead felt wider, more open. Lucas shifted his position, peering past where Titan had been pinned. There was something different about the space beyond. The tunnel widened, the ceiling lifted, and there. A faint glow, barely visible at first. A soft, muted light coming from deeper within. Lucas frowned. "That's not possible," he muttered. "There shouldn't be light. Not this far inside. Not in a place like this." He pushed himself slowly to his feet, every movement cautious now. "Stay close," he said quietly. Titan didn't need to be told. The dog moved beside him immediately, his body brushing lightly against Lucas's leg as they stepped forward together. Once the passage opened wider with each step, the air grew steadier, warmer, and the faint glow ahead sharpened, revealing shapes, edges that didn't belong to raw, untouched stone. Lines, angles, structure. Lucas slowed. His pulse quickened again, but this time not from fear, from something else, something sharper. Curiosity, disbelief. They stepped into the space, and everything changed. The narrow tunnel gave way to a hidden chamber carved deep into the mountain. Not natural, not random, deliberate. A stone wall stood ahead, smoother than the rough passage behind them. To the side, what looked like an old iron vent pipe ran upward into the darkness, disappearing into the rock above. And in the center, a structure. Lucas stared. It wasn't large, but it was unmistakable. A room, built with purpose, stone stacked with care, fitted together in a way that spoke of time, effort, survival. A house, underground. Lucas took a slow step forward, his breath catching as the reality of it settled in. "Someone built this," he whispered. Titan moved ahead slightly, sniffing the ground, then the walls, then the air. The dog's posture shifted, not tense now, not alert in the same way as before. Curious, cautious, but not afraid. Lucas followed, his boots echoing faintly against the stone floor. The faint light came from a narrow opening above, a small shaft carved into the rock, letting in just enough daylight to keep the darkness from swallowing the space entirely. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Lucas turned slowly, taking it all in. The walls, the structure, the signs of something lived in, or at least lived in once, as a place built not just to hide, but to survive. Lucas exhaled, the sound almost shaky. After everything, the cold, the walking, the exhaustion, the fear of having nowhere to go, they had found something something real, something that could keep them alive. He looked down at Titan. The dog met his gaze, steady as always. Lucas let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Guess you knew, didn't you?" Titan didn't answer, but he didn't look away. Lucas nodded once. "All right," he said quietly. For the first time since the door had closed behind him, he wasn't thinking about where he had been or what he had lost. He was thinking about what came next. And somewhere deep inside the mountain, surrounded by stone and silence, Lucas Grant realized something had changed. He hadn't just walked into shelter. Well, he had stepped into something that was waiting to be found. And he hadn't found it alone. For a long moment, Lucas didn't move. He stood just inside the chamber, the faint gray light filtering down from above, tracing the outline of something that shouldn't exist this deep in the mountain. The silence here was different from the forest, less empty, more contained, as if the walls themselves held onto every sound and refused to let it escape. Titan moved first. The dog stepped forward slowly, nose low, scanning every inch of the ground before lifting his head toward the structure ahead. His movements were careful, measured, not fearful, but aware. Lucas followed. Each step echoed softly beneath his boots, the sound dull against the stone floor. As he drew closer, the details sharpened. It wasn't just a rough shelter. It was built, deliberately. Stone walls stacked with precision, fitted tight without gaps. A small opening that might have been a doorway. To one side, a narrow channel carved along the floor, likely for drainage. Above, the vent shaft angled upward, allowing faint light and air to pass through. Someone had spent time here. A lot of time. Lucas reached out, brushing his fingers along the wall. The stone was smooth in places, worn down by years, maybe decades, of use. "This wasn't rushed," he said quietly. Titan paused near the doorway, glancing back as if waiting. Lucas nodded once and stepped inside. The space within was larger than he expected. Not wide, but deep enough to hold more than just a place to sleep. Along one wall sat a stone structure that looked unmistakably like a fireplace, blackened slightly at the center, and as if it had once held fire many times over. Across from it, a low platform built from layered rock, flat enough to serve as a bed, and near the back, shelves, carved directly into the wall, empty now, but not forgotten. Lucas let out a slow breath. "This is real," he murmured. Titan moved to the center of the room and lowered himself slowly, his body finally relaxing for the first time since they had entered. Lucas noticed it immediately. The tension in the dog's posture eased. His breathing slowed. He felt safe. That alone told Lucas more than anything else could have. He stepped deeper inside, setting his bag down near the wall. The weight leaving his shoulder felt almost unreal. For a second, he just stood there, not thinking, not planning, just standing. Well, the cold that had followed him for miles seemed to stop at the entrance of this place. It didn't disappear, but it didn't cut through him the same way anymore. He wasn't exposed, not completely. Lucas exhaled slowly and moved toward the shelves. His hand brushed against something unexpected. Not stone. Paper. He froze. Carefully, he reached forward, pulling the object free from the shallow recess. A notebook. Old. The cover worn, edges curled, but intact. Lucas stared at it for a long second before opening it. The pages inside were yellowed but preserved, the air in the chamber dry enough to keep them from rotting away completely. Handwriting filled the first page. Neat, steady, deliberate. Lucas's eyes scanned the top line. Evelyn Harper. He blinked. 1974? That meant... This place had been here for decades, but his grip on the notebook tightened slightly as he turned the page. More writing. Detailed. Careful notes. Dates. Observations. Wind direction holds steady through the shaft. Stone retains heat longer than expected. If I ration water, I can make it through winter. Lucas swallowed. This wasn't just a journal. It was a record. Of survival. Of someone who had lived down here. Alone. He flipped another page. He won't find me here. Lucas stopped. The words hung there, heavier than the rest. He read them again. He won't find me here. Something shifted in his chest. This place hadn't just been built for survival. It had been built to hide. Lucas exhaled slowly, lowering the notebook. Behind him, Titan shifted. A soft sound escaped the dog, low, tired. Lucas turned immediately. Hey! Titan was still lying down, but his breathing had changed. Slower, uneven. The cloth Lucas had tied around his shoulder was darker now. The blood hadn't stopped completely. Lucas's focus snapped back into place. Hold on, he said, dropping to one knee beside him. He gently peeled back the cloth. The wound wasn't deep, but it had reopened from the movement. Yeah, figured, Lucas muttered. He glanced around the room quickly. Stone, shelves, fireplace, no immediate supplies. He exhaled through his nose, steadying himself. All right, we'll fix this. He reached into his bag, pulling out what little he had left. Another strip of cloth, a small bottle of water. Carefully, he cleaned the wound as best he could. His movements slower now, more controlled. Titan didn't pull away, didn't resist. He just watched Lucas, untrusting. That trust settled something inside Lucas that he hadn't realized was still unsettled. I've got you, he said quietly. This time there was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. When he finished, he secured the bandage more tightly, making sure it would hold. Then he sat back slightly, his hand resting against Titan's neck. The dog's breathing steadied. Lucas stayed there for a moment, his hand unmoving, his mind quiet for the first time since the night began. Then, the cold crept in again, not as sharp as before, but enough. Lucas looked toward the fireplace. Stone, blackened center, used before. He stood slowly. Let's see if this still works, he murmured. He moved toward the opening, scanning the floor nearby. There, old wood, dry, stacked in the corner, preserved by the lack of moisture. So Lucas knelt, picking up a piece. It didn't crumble, still solid, still usable. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Whoever you were, he said quietly, glancing back at the notebook. You knew what you were doing. He gathered what wood he could find and arranged it carefully in the fireplace. His hands moved on instinct now, muscle memory taking over. Strike, spark, another. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a small flicker, weak, but alive. Lucas leaned closer, shielding it with his hand. Come on! The flame caught, slowly at first, then stronger. Light filled the room, soft and warm, pushing back the shadows that had clung to the corners. The temperature shifted almost immediately. Not warm, not yet, but better. Lucas sat back, watching the fire grow. Behind him, Titan lifted his head slightly, eyes reflecting the flame. Lucas looked at him and gave a small nod. Yeah, he said quietly. We'll make it work. The fire crackled softly, the sound steady, grounding. Lucas reached for the notebook again, holding it loosely in his hands as he stared into the flames. Evelyn Harper, a woman who had built a life beneath the mountain, a woman who had survived. Lucas leaned back slightly, his shoulders finally lowering. For the first time since the door had closed behind him, he didn't feel like he was running anymore. He wasn't safe. Not yet. But he wasn't lost either. He glanced at Titan again. The dog's eyes were half closed now, his body finally resting against the stone floor, the tension gone. Lucas let out a slow breath. "Someone survived here," he said softly. The firelight flickered across the walls, dancing against the stone. Lucas's gaze settled on the notebook again. "We can too." The fire burned low and steady through the night. Lucas didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he was sitting against the stone wall, the notebook resting loosely in his hands, the soft crackle of fire filling the space. The next, he was waking to silence. Real silence. Not the hollow kind that had followed him through the mountains. This was different. Contained. Safe. Lucas blinked slowly, his body stiff as he shifted against the cold stone floor. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint orange light across the room. For a moment, he didn't move. He just listened. No wind, no distant echoes, no sudden sounds snapping him awake, just stillness. His chest rose slowly, then fell. Steady. Lucas exhaled. It had been a long time since he had woken up without his heart already racing. A long time since his mind hadn't been halfway somewhere else before his eyes even opened. He turned his head slightly. Titan lay a few feet away, curled near the edge of the fireplace. His chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm, one ear twitching faintly as Lucas moved. Lucas watched him for a second, then another. "Hey," he said quietly. Titan's eyes opened almost instantly, alert, but not tense. He lifted his head, looking straight at Lucas. Lucas gave a small nod. "You made it through." Titan shifted slightly, pushing himself up into a sitting position. He didn't move fast, careful of his shoulder, but there was strength there. Not gone, not broken. Lucas pushed himself up slowly, as his joints protesting after the long cold walk and the hard ground. "Let's check that," he murmured, stepping closer. Titan didn't resist as Lucas knelt beside him, unwrapping the cloth carefully. The wound had closed some, still raw, but not worse. Lucas let out a quiet breath. "All right," he said. "We're good." He rewrapped it, tighter this time, making sure it would hold if Titan moved too much. When he finished, his hand lingered for a moment on the dog's neck. That same grounding point, that same quiet anchor. Titan leaned into it slightly. Just enough. Lucas nodded once, almost to himself. Then he stood. The light from the shaft above had grown slightly brighter, enough to outline the space more clearly. The walls, the shelves, the fireplace. Everything felt more real now, less like something imagined in exhaustion. As Lucas stretched his shoulders, wincing slightly as the stiffness pulled through his muscles. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what we've got." He moved around the space slowly, taking inventory the way he had been trained to do, methodical, precise. The shelves were mostly empty, but not completely. In one corner he found a small metal container, sealed tight. Inside, dry matches, old but still usable. Another shelf held a dented tin cup, a rusted knife that had seen better days, and a coil of thin wire. Not much, but not nothing. Lucas set them carefully near the fireplace. Then he moved to the back wall. There, carved into the stone, was something he hadn't noticed clearly the night before. A shallow basin. Water pooled at the bottom, clear and still. Lucas crouched down, dipping his fingers in. Cold, but not frozen. And a slow drip echoed from somewhere above, feeding it drop by drop. He stared at it for a moment. "Water," he said quietly. His voice sounded almost surprised. After everything, they had water. He glanced back at Titan. The dog was watching him, ears forward. Lucas gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said. "That's a good sign." He stood again, his mind already shifting. Survival, step by step. Water, shelter. Next, food. Lucas's stomach tightened at the thought. He hadn't felt hunger fully the day before. Now it hit, sharp, demanding. He exhaled slowly. "We'll figure that out," he said. Titan stood as Lucas moved toward the entrance again, his posture alert but steady. Lucas paused near the narrow passage, looking back once more at the space. The fire pit, the shelves, the notebook. This place. It wasn't temporary. It had been built to last. Lucas stepped outside. The light hit him harder than expected, reflecting off the snow in a blinding white stretch that made him squint. The storm had passed. For now. The forest stood quiet, heavy with snow, branches weighed down under its weight. Lucas stepped forward, scanning the area. Tracks, fresh ones. Not his, not Titan's. Small, animal. He crouched slightly, studying them. Rabbit. Maybe more than one. His focus sharpened. "There we go," he murmured. Titan stepped beside him, nose low, already catching the scent. Lucas glanced at him. "You up for it?" Titan's ears lifted. That was answer enough. Lucas nodded. "All right. Slow." They moved together, following the tracks through the trees. Lucas's steps were quieter now, more controlled. Not rushed, not desperate, focused. But the hunt didn't take long. A flicker of movement ahead. Titan froze. Lucas saw it too, a small shape darting between the trees. Lucas raised a hand slightly. Titan waited. Lucas shifted his weight, moving carefully, positioning himself. Then, a quick motion. A precise throw with a broken branch he had picked up along the way. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Titan lunged. Fast, controlled. A brief scramble in the snow. Then stillness. Lucas exhaled slowly as Titan returned, carrying the small catch in his mouth. "Good," Lucas said quietly. Titan placed it at his feet. Lucas crouched, his hands steady as he worked quickly, efficiently. No wasted movement, no hesitation. When they returned to the shelter, the fire came back to life quickly. The warmth grew stronger this time, more real. Lucas sat near it, just the food cooking slowly, the scent filling the space. Titan lay nearby, watching him. Lucas glanced over. "You earned it," he said, tossing a piece toward him once it was ready. Titan caught it easily. Lucas leaned back slightly, the heat finally reaching his hands, his face. He closed his eyes for just a second. And this time, nothing pulled him away. No sudden noise. No flash of memory dragging him under. Just the sound of fire. The steady breathing of the dog beside him. The quiet drip of water against stone. Lucas opened his eyes again, staring into the flames. Days passed, then more. The routine settled in. Wake. Check Titan. Check the fire. Check the water, hunt. Repair, rest. The notebook became a guide. Evelyn's words, written decades ago, led him through the small things. And how to manage the fire so it lasted longer. How to keep air flowing through the vent. How to store what little food they gathered. Lucas followed it all. Adjusted, improved. Titan grew stronger each day. The wound healed slowly, the bandage replaced again and again until it was no longer needed. But the scars remained. Lucas noticed them, and Titan noticed Lucas. The quiet moments came more often now. The ones where Lucas would sit still, staring at nothing, breathing, not running, not fighting, just existing. And every time those moments stretched too long, Titan would move, a nudge, a shift, a presence, pulling him back, grounding him. Lucas leaned back against the stone wall one evening, the fire steady in front of him. Titan lay beside him, head resting near Lucas's leg. Lucas looked down at him. He said quietly, I don't think I would have made it out there. Titan didn't move, but his ear flicked. Lucas nodded slightly. Yeah, he murmured. I know. The fire crackled softly. The mountain held its silence, and for the first time in a long time, Lucas Grant wasn't just surviving. He was starting to breathe again. The days settled into a rhythm so quiet, it almost felt unreal. Morning light would slip down through the narrow shaft above, tracing slow patterns along the stone walls. The fire would still be warm from the night before, coals glowing faint beneath the ash. Titan would already be awake, always awake first, watching the entrance with that steady, unblinking focus. Lucas learned to trust that. If Titan was calm, the world was calm. If Titan wasn't, Lucas pushed the thought aside, and he stepped out into the snow that morning with a steadier stride than he'd had since the night he left the ranch. The air was sharp but clean, the storm long gone, leaving behind a stillness that stretched across the Bitterroot wilderness like a held breath. Titan moved ahead of him, nose low, tracking. Lucas followed, scanning the terrain with quiet precision. They didn't go far anymore, not like before. He had learned that survival wasn't about covering ground. It was about understanding the ground you stood on. And this place was becoming familiar, predictable, safe. Or at least it had been. Titan stopped. Not the usual pause, not the subtle shift of attention. This was immediate, rigid. His body locked in place, head lifted slightly, ears forward, tail still. Lucas froze. The air changed, and it wasn't something he could see or hear. But it was there. A feeling. A pressure. Like something unseen had stepped into the space around them. What is it? Lucas whispered. Titan didn't look back. He didn't move. He simply stared toward the trees ahead. Lucas followed his gaze. At first, nothing. Just snow-covered branches, shadows stretching between trunks. Still, silent. Then, a mark. Faint. Barely visible. Lucas stepped forward slowly, his eyes narrowing. Tracks. Not animal. Human. Boot prints. Half covered by drifting snow, but fresh enough to still hold shape. Lucas's chest tightened. He crouched slightly, studying them. One person. Moving carefully. Not wandering. Following. Lucas's jaw set. How long? He murmured under his breath. Titan shifted slightly, at a low sound building in his chest. Not a full growl, but close. Easy, Lucas said quietly, but his own pulse had already started to rise. Someone had been here. Close. Too close. He straightened slowly, scanning the tree line again. Nothing moved. Nothing revealed itself. But the silence felt different now. Heavier. Watching. Lucas stepped back. All right, he said under his breath. We're done here. Titan didn't argue. They moved quickly now, but not recklessly. Lucas kept his steps controlled, his path less direct than usual, angling through the trees in a way that broke the obvious line back to the entrance. Old habits, old instincts. They didn't leave him, not completely. When they reached the hidden opening, Lucas paused. He turned once more, eyes scanning the forest. Still nothing. But the feeling didn't fade. Not even a little. He ducked inside. The darkness closed around them again. But this time it didn't feel like shelter. It felt like cover. Lucas moved deeper into the chamber, setting his bag down near the fire pit. Titan didn't settle like he usually did. He paced, slow, controlled, back and forth between the entrance and the center of the room. Lucas watched him. "Yeah," he muttered. "I feel it too." He moved to the fire, feeding it carefully, bringing the flames back to life. The light pushed the shadows back again, but not as far as before, not as easily. Lucas sat down, his eyes drifting toward the notebook resting on the shelf. Evelyn Harper. He reached for it, flipping through pages he hadn't read yet. The handwriting stayed consistent, calm, measured, until it didn't. Lucas stopped. The ink on one page pressed harder into the paper, the lines slightly uneven. "I saw him again today." Lucas's brow tightened. He leaned closer. Not close, but near enough. He's still looking. Lucas's grip on the notebook tightened slightly. "I have to be careful with the fire now. Smoke carries farther than I thought." Lucas exhaled slowly. The room felt smaller. "If he finds this place..." The sentence stopped there, unfinished. Lucas closed the notebook. Slowly. He didn't need to read more to understand. This place. It hadn't just been a refuge. It had been hunted. Lucas leaned back slightly, his eyes drifting toward the entrance. Then to Titan. The dog had stopped pacing. He stood still now, facing the tunnel, every muscle tight, waiting. Lucas felt it again, that same pressure in the air, at that sense of something just beyond sight. "We're not alone," he said quietly. Titan didn't move. Lucas stood slowly. His body didn't feel the same as it had a few days ago. The exhaustion was still there. The cold, the hunger. But something else had come back too. Awareness. Focus. The edge that had never really left him. Just dulled. He moved toward the entrance, stopping just short of the narrow passage. Listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just silence. Lucas's hand rested lightly against the stone wall. "If someone's tracking us," he murmured, "they'll find this eventually." Titan shifted slightly, stepping closer. Lucas looked down at him, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "I know." He turned back toward the fire, toward the space that had started to feel like something more than just shelter. For the first time since they had found it. Lucas felt the weight of losing it, and that thought settled heavier than the cold ever had. Outside, the forest remained still, but somewhere beyond the trees, someone had already stepped into their world, and they hadn't left. The next morning came without warning. No gradual light, no quiet easing into day, just a sudden shift in the air. Lucas felt it before he saw it. The pressure dropped, sharp, heavy, like the mountain itself was tightening around them. He stepped toward the entrance, Titan already at his side, both of them moving in the same silent understanding. Outside, the sky had turned. Dark. Not with night, with something else. Clouds rolled low over the ridge, thick and fast, swallowing what little light tried to break through. Well, the wind had returned, but this time it didn't whisper. It howled. Lucas stepped back instinctively as the first gust tore through the trees, ripping loose snow from branches and hurling it sideways through the air. "This isn't just wind," he said under his breath. Titan's ears flattened slightly, his posture tightening. Lucas scanned the horizon. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. "Inside," Lucas said quickly. They moved back through the narrow passage just as the second wave hit, harder, louder, carrying a force that echoed through the rock itself. The chamber darkened as the light above dimmed further, the shaft filling with swirling snow. Lucas moved fast now. Fire, airflow, seal what he could. He adjusted the vent slightly, controlling how much wind forced its way down. But not too much. Too much would kill the fire. Too little, and the smoke would choke them. Balance. Everything depended on balance. Titan stayed close, pacing once, then settling near the center of the room. But he didn't relax. Not this time. Lucas knelt near the fire, feeding it carefully, building it stronger than before. "We ride it out," he muttered. The wind roared outside, louder now, pressing against the mountain, forcing its way into every crack and opening it could find. The sound, it changed. Not just wind anymore. It became something else. Deeper, rhythmic. Lucas froze. His hand stopped mid-motion. The fire flickered in front of him, but he wasn't seeing it. Not anymore. The sound, it was too familiar, too close, too much like rotors. His breath caught. The chamber shifted. The stone walls blurred into something darker, tighter, louder. The air thickened, filled with echoes that weren't there. Lucas's chest tightened, his lungs pulling in air that didn't feel like enough. "No," he whispered. But the sound didn't stop. It grew, louder, closer. The fire snapped, sending a burst of sparks upward. And for a second, it wasn't fire. It was something else. Flashes, noise, shouting. Lucas staggered back, his shoulder hitting the wall hard enough to jolt him. His vision fractured. The room wasn't stable. It wasn't real. A weight hit him, solid, grounding, Titan. The dog pressed hard against him, forcing him to stay upright, to stay here. Lucas's breath came in sharp bursts. He tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Titan didn't move away. He leaned in harder, firm, unshaken. But Lucas squeezed his eyes shut. "Stay here," he forced out. The words were rough, uneven, but they were real. He focused on the pressure against his side, on the steady warmth, on the sound of Titan's breathing. In, out, in, out. Not rotors, not noise, not chaos. Just this. Lucas opened his eyes. The chamber snapped back into place. Stone, fire, snow swirling faintly through the shaft above. The sound of wind still howled, but it was just wind now, nothing more. Lucas exhaled slowly, his body trembling slightly as the tension drained out of him. "Yeah," he muttered. "Yeah, I'm here." Titan didn't move. He stayed pressed against him until Lucas steadied. Then, and only then, did he step back slightly. Lucas ran a hand down the back of his neck, grounding himself again. "That one was close," he said quietly. The storm intensified. Hours passed. Or maybe it was less. Time lost meaning again inside the mountain. The wind didn't stop. It built. Layer after layer, until the sound became constant, an unbroken roar that filled every corner of the space. Snow forced its way through the shaft in bursts, swirling down like ash before melting near the fire. The temperature dropped, even inside. Lucas adjusted constantly. Fire, vent, position. Every decision mattered. Every mistake could cost them. Titan stayed near him, always near. At one point, Lucas noticed something. The dog wasn't just staying close for warmth. He was watching him. Every movement, every breath. Like he was waiting for something. Lucas frowned slightly. What? Titan didn't answer. But his eyes didn't leave Lucas. The storm howled louder, but the walls seemed to press in. The fire flickered harder under the shifting air. Lucas adjusted it again, slower this time, more controlled. "You're not worried about the storm," he said quietly, glancing at Titan. The dog's ears twitched. Lucas leaned back slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You're worried about me." Titan didn't move, but he didn't look away. Lucas let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said. "I get it." He reached down, resting his hand against Titan's head for a moment. The contact steadied both of them. Outside. The storm hit its peak. The sound became almost unbearable, the wind slamming against the mountain with a force that felt alive, unpredictable. Then, a new sound. Faint. Different. Lucas's head snapped toward the entrance. Titan was already standing, alert, every muscle locked. "What is that?" Lucas whispered. It wasn't wind. Not entirely. It cut through the roar in uneven bursts. A rhythm. A pattern. Lucas moved slowly toward the passage, his heart beginning to pound again. "Stay," he said quietly. Titan didn't stay. He followed. Of course he did. Lucas reached the narrow opening, stopping just before the exit. The sound came again. Faint. Strained. Almost lost beneath the storm. Lucas's breath caught. "That's not the wind." Titan let out a low, sharp sound. Focused. Locked. Lucas leaned closer, straining to hear. There. Again. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Not nature. Not random. Something else. Something human. Lucas pulled back slightly, his mind racing. Out there. In this. Someone was alive, and they weren't going to survive it for long. And he looked down at Titan. The dog was already staring at him. Waiting. Lucas swallowed. The shelter behind him. Safe. Warm. Hidden. And out there. Death. Cold. The storm. Lucas closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. "Not yet," he said under his breath. But the sound came again. Closer this time. Weaker. Lucas's jaw tightened. The choice wasn't coming. It was already here. The sound came again. Faint. Broken. Carried in pieces through the roar of the storm. Lucas stood at the mouth of the passage, every instinct pulling in opposite directions at once. Stay. Survive. Protect what you have. Or move. Risk everything. He clenched his jaw, his hand tightening against the stone wall. "This is how people die," he muttered under his breath. Not from the storm, from the decision, and from stepping out when they should have stayed in, from believing they could beat something bigger than them. Titan shifted beside him, not pacing, not restless, focused, locked onto the same direction as before, waiting. Lucas looked down at him. "You hear it too," he said quietly. Titan's ears flicked forward. That was answer enough. Lucas exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to steady. Think. Distance. Conditions. Survival time. If someone was out there, they wouldn't last long. Not in this. Not with the temperature dropping this fast. Lucas turned, glancing back at the fire, at the shelter, at the only place that had kept them alive, and for a second, he saw it differently. Not just shelter, a line, a boundary. Cross it, and there was no guarantee of coming back. Lucas swallowed. "This is stupid," he said, but his feet didn't move. The sound came again, closer now, weak, almost gone. Titan stepped forward. Lucas's head snapped toward him. "Hey!" But Titan didn't stop. The dog moved into the passage, fast but controlled, his body already angled toward the exit. "Titan!" Lucas lunged forward, grabbing for him. Too late. The dog disappeared into the narrow opening, swallowed by the storm outside. Lucas froze. For a split second, everything went silent. Not the storm, not the wind, but the space inside him. The part that calculated, the part that hesitated. Gone. "What are you doing?" he whispered. The storm howled louder, and Titan didn't come back. Lucas's chest tightened. "No." He turned sharply, grabbing his jacket, pulling it tighter around him, his movements already shifting from hesitation to action. "You don't go out there alone," he said under his breath. Not to the dog, to himself. He stepped into the passage. The cold hit him like a wall, hard, immediate. The wind slammed into him the second he cleared the entrance, forcing him to brace himself just to stay upright. Snow blasted across his face, blinding, cutting through every layer. Lucas staggered forward, his boots sinking into uneven drifts as he forced his way into the storm. "Titan!" His voice disappeared instantly, swallowed by the wind. He could barely see, barely breathe. The world reduced to white and gray and movement. Lucas pushed forward anyway. Step, then another. His eyes strained, scanning through the chaos. Nothing. No shape, no movement, just storm. "Come on," he muttered, his voice tight, desperate. Then, a shape, low, moving, as Lucas's heart jumped. "There!" Titan. The dog was ahead, cutting through the snow, his body barely visible as he pushed forward with relentless focus. "Titan, stop!" The dog didn't stop. He veered left, sharp. Lucas followed, his footing unstable, his body fighting every step. The ground shifted beneath him, a dip, a slope. Lucas nearly lost his balance, catching himself just in time as he slid a short distance down. "Easy," he muttered. Then he saw it, a dark shape in the snow. Still, half covered. Lucas's breath caught. "Oh, no." He pushed forward, dropping to his knees beside it. A person, buried partially beneath the snow, their body barely visible under layers of ice and wind-packed drifts. "Hey! Hey!" Lucas's hands moved quickly, brushing snow away, uncovering a face, pale, frozen, but breathing, shallow, weak. Lucas exhaled sharply. All right. I've got you." Titan circled tightly, alert, scanning the area even as Lucas worked. Lucas grabbed the person's shoulder, pulling them up slightly. Dead weight, no strength left. "This is bad," he muttered. He looked around quickly. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten worse, and they weren't close. Not close enough. Lucas's mind raced. Distance, time, strength. One person, maybe. More. A sound. Lucas froze. Not wind. Again. A different direction. He turned. "Are you serious?" he breathed. Another shape. Further out. Then another. 3. No. 4. Scattered. All down, all still. Lucas's chest tightened. "Titan!" The dog was already moving. Lucas grabbed him instinctively. "No, wait!" Titan stopped, but barely, and his body trembled with tension. His eyes locked on the others. Lucas looked back at the shelter. He couldn't see it. Couldn't even see the direction clearly anymore. Then he looked at the people in the snow. Then at Titan. then back again. "This isn't a rescue," he said quietly. "This is a gamble." The storm howled. The cold pressed in. The choice wasn't about one life anymore. It was about all of them. Lucas closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them again. Decision made. "All right," he said. His voice was steady now, clear. "We're not leaving them." Titan didn't move, but his posture changed. Locked in. Ready. Lucas nodded once. "Then we do it right." He grabbed the first person, pulling them up, shifting their weight across his shoulders. Heavy, too heavy, but not impossible. "Stay close," he said. Titan moved ahead immediately, breaking a path, his body cutting through the snow with purpose. Lucas followed, step by step, dragging, lifting, forcing movement where there should have been none left. The storm didn't care. It didn't slow. It didn't give them anything. But Lucas kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option anymore. Not for him, not for them, and not for the dog who had already made the choice for both of them. The storm swallowed everything: sound, distance, direction. Lucas moved through it like a man walking against a wall that kept pushing back. Each step felt heavier than the last. The weight across his shoulders dragged him down. The person's body limp, unresponsive, their breath barely there against the side of his neck. "Stay with me," Lucas muttered, though he didn't know if they could hear him. Titan moved ahead, his form cutting through the white blur, never stopping, never hesitating. Lucas followed, because there was no other option. The path back wasn't visible. It wasn't clear. It wasn't safe. But Titan knew. Lucas trusted that more than anything else. The wind howled louder, slamming into them from the side, nearly knocking Lucas off balance. He staggered, his knee buckling for a second. But Titan stopped, turned, waited. Lucas gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright again. "Don't you stop on me," he muttered. Titan didn't. They kept moving. Step, drag, lift, repeat. Time stretched. Or maybe it collapsed. Lucas couldn't tell. The storm erased everything except the next step, the next breath, the next movement forward. Then, the ground shifted, went familiar. The slope angled slightly upward. Lucas's pulse spiked. "Come on," he whispered. Titan surged forward, and suddenly, the outline appeared. Faint, barely visible through the storm. The rock face. The entrance. "Yeah," Lucas breathed. Relief hit hard, but it didn't slow him down. Not yet. Not until they were inside. He pushed forward, his body burning now, every muscle screaming under the strain. Titan reached the opening first, disappearing inside. Lucas followed seconds later, ducking through the narrow gap, dragging the person with him. The wind cut off instantly. The silence hit just as hard. Lucas stumbled forward, collapsing to one knee as he pulled the person fully into the passage. "Stay with me," he said again, his voice rough. He didn't stop. He couldn't. He dragged them deeper into the chamber, and the fire still glowing faintly where he had left it. Not dead. Not yet. "Good," he muttered. He lowered the person near the fire, quickly feeding it, building it back up with shaking hands. The flame caught, slowly, then stronger. Heat began to spread. Lucas turned back immediately. No pause. No rest. He moved back toward the entrance. Titan was already there, waiting. Lucas nodded once. Again. The dog didn't hesitate. They went back out. The second run was worse. The storm had thickened. Visibility dropped even further. Lucas had to rely on Titan almost completely now, following the faint shape ahead of him, trusting every turn, every shift in direction. They reached the second person, then the third. Each time, Lucas forced his body to move, forced strength into muscles that had already started to fail. The third was smaller, lighter, a child. Lucas's breath caught as he lifted them. All right, I've got you. The fourth. He almost didn't see him, buried deeper, half covered, still. Lucas dropped to his knees, brushing snow away, his hands moving faster now, more desperate. Come on. A faint breath. Barely there. Alive. Lucas exhaled sharply. Not today. Titan circled tightly, then stopped, still, alert. Lucas followed his gaze. Another shape, standing, not fallen, not buried, watching. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Derek Shaw, the hunter. Even in the storm, there was no mistaking him. Tall, still, his outline barely visible through the snow. Lucas's chest tightened. Of course it was him, the man who had been tracking them, the man who had been watching, now here, now part of this. Now Derek didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't help. He just stood there, his face unreadable through the storm. Lucas held his gaze for a second, then broke it. Not now, he muttered. There was no room for that. Not here. Not in this. Lucas lifted the last person, shifting their weight with difficulty. Move, he said to Titan. The dog moved instantly. Lucas didn't look back again. Not at Derek. Not at anything except the path ahead. The return was slower, harder. Every step felt like it might be the last. But they made it. Again and again. Until finally, the last body was inside. Lucas collapsed just inside the chamber, his hands braced against the stone floor, his breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. The fire burned stronger now, the heat pushing back the cold just enough to make a difference. When Titan moved immediately, checking each of the people, circling, alert. Lucas forced himself up. No stopping, he said under his breath. He moved from one person to the next. Checking breathing, position, warming. Everything had to be done right. No mistakes. Not after all of that. One of them coughed weakly. Another shifted slightly. Signs of life. Lucas nodded. Good. Good. Then, a sound behind him. Heavy. Unsteady. Lucas turned. Derek stood at the entrance. Barely. His body leaned against the stone, his strength clearly gone. Snow clung to him, his face pale, his eyes barely open. For a second, Lucas just stared at him. This was the man who had been tracking him, who had been closing in, who had turned this place from shelter into something hunted. And now, he was dying, right there, at the edge of the same place he had tried to find. Lucas exhaled slowly. This isn't how this ends, he said quietly. He pushed himself up and walked toward him. Derek didn't resist, didn't speak. He didn't have the strength. Lucas grabbed him, pulling him inside, lowering him near the others. Titan watched, silent. Still. Lucas met the dog's gaze for a brief second, then nodded. Yeah, he said. All of them. The fire burned. The storm raged outside. But inside, the chamber had changed. It wasn't just shelter anymore. It wasn't just survival. It had become something else. A place where people came to the edge and were pulled back. Lucas sat back slightly, his body finally slowing, his breath steadying as he looked at the people around him, then at Titan. "You did this," he said quietly. Well, Titan didn't respond, but he didn't look away. Lucas nodded once, and for the first time since the storm began, he allowed himself to believe something. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were saving lives. The storm began to weaken sometime before dawn. Not all at once, not cleanly, but the sound changed. The constant roar softened into something uneven, broken by stretches of quiet that hadn't existed for hours. Inside the chamber, the fire burned strong. Lucas hadn't slept. He moved from one person to the next, checking breathing, adjusting positions, feeding small amounts of water when he could. Titan stayed close, always moving, always watching. Every time someone shifted, every time a breath hitched, he was there. Lucas noticed it. Not just instinct, not just training, something deeper, something that didn't break under pressure. "You're holding this place together," Lucas muttered quietly as he passed by him. Titan's ears flicked, but he didn't stop. The first to wake was the child. A small cough, weak, but enough. Lucas turned immediately, dropping to one knee beside them. "Hey, easy," he said, his voice low, steady. The child blinked slowly, eyes unfocused, confusion flickering across their face. "You're okay," Lucas said. "You're safe." The words felt strange in his mouth, but they weren't a lie. Not anymore. The others followed, one by one. Slow, disoriented, but alive. Lucas kept his movements controlled, calm, giving them just enough information to keep panic from setting in. "Storm hit hard," he said. "You got caught in it. You're inside now. You made it." That was all they needed. That was all they could handle. The last to wake was Derek. It happened without warning. One moment he was still. The next, a sharp inhale. His body jerked slightly, his eyes snapping open. Lucas turned immediately. Derek's gaze locked onto the ceiling first, then shifted, scanning, searching, until it landed on Lucas. Recognition hit, followed by something else. Confusion. "You!" Derek rasped. His voice was rough, barely holding together. Lucas didn't react. He didn't step back, didn't step forward. He just stood there. "Yeah," Lucas said. Derek's brow tightened, his mind trying to catch up. You were out there." Lucas nodded once. "You were too." Derek let out a weak breath that might have been a laugh, or something close to it. "Didn't think," he trailed off, his voice fading. But Lucas crouched slightly, his movements measured. "You don't have to think right now," he said. "Just breathe." Derek stared at him, long, hard. Then his eyes shifted to Titan. The dog stood a few feet away, still watching. Derek's expression changed. Not fear, not exactly. Recognition. "That dog," he murmured. Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly. "What about him?" Derek swallowed, his throat dry. "I've seen him before." Lucas didn't respond, didn't interrupt. Derek's gaze drifted, unfocused for a second before settling again. "Tracking you," he said. There it was, out in the open. Lucas didn't flinch. "I figured." Derek let out a slow breath. "Didn't expect." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "This." Lucas followed his gaze. The chamber, the fire, the people, alive. "Yeah," Lucas said quietly. "Oh, neither did I." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, not hostile, just real. Derek shifted slightly, wincing as the movement pulled at his body. Lucas moved instinctively, adjusting the support beneath him. "Don't," Derek muttered. "Just stay still," Lucas replied. Derek looked at him again. Different this time. Less sharp. Less certain. "You should have left me," he said. Lucas didn't answer right away. He leaned back slightly, his eyes drifting toward the fire. Then back. "No," he said simply. Derek frowned slightly. "Why?" Lucas's jaw tightened. For a second. He didn't have an answer. Not one he could explain. Then, he glanced at Titan. The dog stood exactly where he had been, watching both of them without moving. Lucas exhaled slowly. "Because he wouldn't have," he said. Derek followed his gaze. To Titan. The dog didn't react, didn't shift, just held his ground. Derek stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Figures," he murmured. The silence stretched again, but this time, it didn't feel uncertain. Lucas reached for the notebook, almost without thinking. He flipped it open, scanning through the pages again. Evelyn Harper. The words felt heavier now, more real. Derek's voice broke the silence. "Where'd you find that?" Lucas didn't look up. "Here," he said. Derek's breath caught slightly. "Let me see." Lucas hesitated, just for a second, then handed it over. Derek's hands trembled slightly as he took it, his eyes scanning the pages quickly. Faster than Lucas expected, like he already knew what he was looking for. Then, he stopped. His grip tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. Aunt Lucas watched him. "What?" Derek looked up slowly. His face had changed. Not just from the cold. Not just from exhaustion. Something deeper. Something unsettled. "That's her," he said. Lucas frowned. "Who?" Derek swallowed. "My grandmother." The words hung in the air. Lucas didn't react immediately. Didn't move. Didn't speak. "Evelyn Harper," Derek said quietly. "She disappeared in the 70s. Lucas's chest tightened slightly. "She didn't disappear," he said. Derek shook his head slowly. "That's what everyone thought." He looked around the chamber, the walls, the fire, the structure. "But she built this." Lucas exhaled slowly. The pieces shifted, locked into place. "She was hiding," he said. Derek nodded. "From my grandfather." Lucas didn't ask. He didn't need to. The answer was already there, written between the lines. Derek looked back at the notebook, his expression distant. "She never came back," he said. Lucas watched him, then glanced at the pages, at the unfinished line. "If he finds this place," Lucas's jaw tightened. "She didn't make it out," he said. Derek didn't answer, but his silence was enough. The fire crackled softly. The mountain held its quiet. And then, Derek spoke again. "There's more," he said. Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" Derek looked up, straight at him. "You said your name was Lucas Grant." Lucas nodded once. Derek studied him for a long second. "My grandmother had a daughter," he said. Lucas's breath slowed. "She left," Derek continued. "No records, no trace." Lucas didn't move, didn't blink. Derek's voice dropped slightly. Your age lines up." The room shifted, not physically, but something inside it changed. Lucas felt it. Deep. Unsteady. "That doesn't mean anything," Lucas said, but his voice wasn't as solid as before. Derek held his gaze. "Means more than you think." Lucas looked away, just for a second, toward the fire, toward Titan. The dog stood exactly where he had been, calm, steady, unshaken. Lucas exhaled slowly. The storm outside had passed, but something else had just begun. Something he hadn't been ready for. Something buried deeper than the mountain itself. And now, it was coming to the surface. The storm didn't return. By morning, the wind had died down to a distant whisper, and the sky above the narrow shaft opened just enough to let clean light spill into the chamber. For the first time in days, the world outside wasn't trying to kill them. It was quiet. Still. Almost. Peaceful. Lucas stood near the entrance, looking out through the narrow opening. Snow had reshaped the entire landscape. Drifts rose where there had been paths. Familiar ground had disappeared under smooth, untouched white. It looked like a different world. Behind him, the chamber was no longer silent. Soft voices. Careful movement. Life. The people they had pulled from the storm were awake now, weak but sitting up, talking in low tones, drinking water slowly, holding on to warmth like it might disappear if they let go. Lucas turned back. Titan moved through them calmly, checking each one without needing direction. A quiet presence. Steady, reassuring. One of the men reached out slightly as Titan passed, resting a hand briefly against his fur. "Oh, good dog," he murmured. Titan didn't react, but he didn't move away either. Lucas watched that for a second, then nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly. "He is." Derek sat near the wall, the notebook resting in his lap. He looked stronger than the night before, but not by much. His eyes followed Lucas as he stepped back into the chamber. "You were right," Derek said. Lucas paused. "About what?" Derek glanced around. "This place?" Lucas exhaled slowly. "It's not mine," he said. Derek gave a faint, tired smile. "Doesn't matter," he replied. "You made it what it is now." Lucas didn't answer. He wasn't used to that. To being seen that way. To being needed. One of the women spoke up softly from across the room. "We wouldn't be alive without you." Lucas looked over. She held his gaze, her voice steady despite everything. "Oh, and your dog?" Lucas glanced down. Titan stood beside him, still as always. Lucas nodded once. "We just did what we had to," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew that wasn't entirely true. They had done more than that. They had chosen something most people wouldn't have. And now, it had changed everything. A sound echoed faintly from outside. Different this time. Distant. Mechanical. Lucas's head turned sharply. Titan reacted first. Alert. Focused. The sound grew louder. Familiar. But not wrong. Not like before. Lucas stepped toward the entrance again, his pulse steady but aware. Through the narrow opening, he saw movement. Not the storm. Not the wilderness. Something else. Figures. More than one. Moving carefully across the snow. Search and rescue. Lucas exhaled slowly. "They found us," he said. Behind him, the others stirred. Relief. Shock. Disbelief. Derek let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Took them long enough," he muttered. Lucas stepped outside. The cold was still there, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Not after everything. The rescue team spotted him almost immediately, their movements quickening as they approached. "Sir, are there others with you?" Lucas nodded. "Inside. 4 survivors." They moved fast after that. Organized, efficient, stretchers, blankets, voices filling the space where silence had lived for days. Lucas stepped back, letting them work. Titan stayed at his side. Always. As the last of the survivors were brought out, one of the rescuers turned to Lucas. "You coming with us?" Lucas looked back at the entrance, at the stone, and at the place that had held him when nothing else had. Then he looked down at Titan. The dog met his gaze, steady, unwavering. Lucas shook his head slightly. "Not yet," he said. The rescuer frowned. "You sure?" Lucas nodded. "Yeah." Derek was the last to be carried out. As they passed, his eyes met Lucas's. Something unspoken there. Recognition. Understanding. Then he was gone. The noise faded. The movement slowed. Until it was just Lucas again. And Titan. Standing at the edge of the wilderness. But it wasn't the same anymore. Lucas turned back toward the entrance. Toward the stone house beneath the mountain. The place that had started as nothing. As survival. As desperation. And had become something else entirely. Days passed, then weeks. The story spread. A veteran, a dog, hidden shelter in the mountains, lives saved. People came, officials, reporters, search and rescue teams. They didn't see what Lucas had seen at first, not fully. But they understood enough. The shelter became something official, recognized, maintained. A place marked on maps. A place people could find. A place people could survive. Lucas stood outside one morning, watching the sun rise over the snow-covered ridge. Titan sat beside him, his shoulder scar visible beneath his fur. A reminder of what had been risked, of what had been earned. Footsteps approached from behind. Lucas didn't turn right away. He already knew who it was. Daniel and Rebecca. They stopped a few feet away. Neither spoke at first. Lucas finally turned. Their expressions had changed. Gone was the cold distance, the dismissal, while in its place, something else. Regret. Uncertainty. "We heard," Daniel started, then stopped. Lucas didn't help him, didn't fill the silence. Rebecca stepped forward slightly. "We didn't know," she said. Lucas looked at her, then at Daniel, then back again. For a moment, the old weight pressed in. The past, the house, the door closing. "You're not our responsibility anymore." Lucas exhaled slowly, then shook his head. "You were right," he said. They blinked, caught off guard. Lucas rested a hand lightly on Titan's back. "We weren't your responsibility." He looked out at the mountains, at the place that had taken everything from him and given something back. "We were never supposed to stay there." He turned back to them, calm, steady, certain. "We were being led here." Silence settled between them. But this time, it wasn't empty. Lucas turned away, not angry, not bitter, just done. He walked back toward the stone house, toward the life he had built from nothing. Titan moved with him, always. At the entrance, Lucas paused for a second, looking out at the world beyond, then stepped inside. Not as someone hiding, not as someone surviving, but as someone who had found where he belonged. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel temporary anymore. If this story meant something to you, if you felt even a moment of what Lucas and Titan went through, drop a simple 1 in the comments. No long message needed. Just a 1, so we know you're here with us. And if you believe loyalty still matters, if you believe a dog can save a life, type dog in the comments too. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, unforgettable journeys of veterans and their dogs, hit subscribe and stay with us. Because the next story might hit even deeper.